representing Franchise Secrets, Eric Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a ZOR, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Hey, it's Eric here. In this episode, I interviewed Bennett Maxwell. Bennett is the founder of Dirty Dough Cookies, an absolute competitor to Crumbl. And we talk about what are the things he loves about Crumbl? What are the things that he's trying to do better than Crumbl? And by the way, he's a huge fan of Crumbl. But we get into things in this episode of who are the buyers? And there's some massive players that are trying to get into the space. Why are they getting in there? Why did he have a board of advisors? Why am I on his board of advisors? And they're an actual one of my portfolio brands. They've got a really cool giving back component that he is very passionate about. And it goes into the branding and the giving back. And I think it's a really cool thing that he's doing. And it goes beyond making money, and it's going to help a lot of people. We also talk about how to grow a fast brand and try to avoid mistakes. Like, how do you do that? So one of the last things that we kind of covered is not being first to market, being second to market or third to market. What are the pros and cons of that? And then how to hire rock star people. He's got an amazing team that he's put together there. So he's building this brand that is different than Crumbl, better in his opinion. And I'll let you be the judge of that. Bennett, thanks for taking some time to come on the show. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited to be here.
So this is going to be a super fun conversation all around Dirty Dough Cookies. Everyone in my audience probably knows who Crumbl Cookies is because I talked about that, a long time ago. And then you and I got connected in Dirty Dough. I'm like, man, I need to have a conversation with this guy. And then one thing led to another. But man, why don't we go back to the beginning a little bit, even before you and I met, and talk about your solar company and how you found Dirty Dough that eventually turned into a franchise.
Okay, so it actually did start with Crumbl, just like many of our other franchisees. I wanted to get a Crumbl. My cousin's involved with Crumbl, and he's like, dude, this franchise is killer. You need one of these. And I'm like, done. I'm an easy sell. Let's go. They were already sold out of Utah at that time. This was like 3.5 years ago, but man, they sold out so quick. So it's like, okay, well, where else can I buy one? Well, and then they started to explain, well, you have to live there to operate it, which is understandable. But I'm like, I'm not going to go move to make cookies my career right now. I'm going to go, start selling solar. So that's got me interested though. I was like, wow, there's money in this cookie thing. And this is cool and it's fun. It's a fun product. So I went and started solar, just doing door-to-door sales, and saw somebody's Facebook post saying, I have a cookie company in Tempe, Arizona. I'm doing delivery out of my ASU apartment and I want to get into an actual retail storefront. So I'm looking for some money. So I ended up investing with him so he could bring it from, his apartment to the actual retail storefront. And at the same time, I started my own solar company, started knocking doors for another company, loved it, and teamed up with my brother. We had our first official solar recruit in January of 2020. The Dirty Dough store opened in March of 2020. The grand opening was planned for the week of the COVID closures of the lockdowns. So there's never any grand opening, but I was very hands off. Like, I just gave him some money. I didn't even ever visit the store when it opened or months after it opened. And then Crumbl opened up in San Diego and they were crushing it. Lines out the door around the corner. I counted 18 employees in there and I was like, what the heck? And anyways, it was so cool that they were having so much success. So I'm like, Tyler, Dirty Dough, he's the owner of Dirty Dough. Let's get one out here. And he goes, let's do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm your first franchisee. I found my location. I negotiated the lease. It was like on Pacific Beach. It was going to kill it. And he never filed the franchise docs for like months. And then I'm like, what's going on? And he goes, you know what? I'm pulling 100-hour weeks still. I live in the store. I'm sick of it. I'm looking to sell. So I thought, I've never been in food or franchising before, but cookies are hot right now. So let's roll the dice with it. So I bought the company in January of 2021 and started running it. I was based in San Diego and I started running it from Arizona. But I thought I want to build this up to be different than Crumbl in the fact that I'm a big believer in investments and passive money and try to make it as passive as possible. A big believer, if you own your own business, but you're required to show up every day to make money, it's not technically a business. You just own your own job that you work the hardest and you get paid last. And it's typically not the best job. So how do I provide an actual business opportunity in what I see as a true business that it's a lot more on the passive side? So it's like, oh, well, me being a dummy, if I can run it from San Diego out of Tempe, Arizona and prove the model, then I think we have something. So that's what I started doing. And yeah, granted, we did change everything. We did change the model completely, but that's how I got into it and kind of jumped into it. And then a few months after I bought the Dirty Dough, I sold the solar business in June of 2021 and then dove full-time into Dirty Dough.
So people that don't know the solar business, door knocking, selling solar, people make a ton of money doing that too. So if you can,
it's a great business. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can get into that, and I don't know a franchise. I've looked at franchising that model. I just never did. And the people that I was with, we just never did for various different reasons, but that's a killer industry. So you were in a killer industry before, you had a really good exit there, and now you're in another killer industry, which is cookies. So, and you are one of these guys that is an investor, wants to not work in the business, the whole E-Myth thing, not wanting to work in the business.
Exactly.
So you started this franchise. Are you thinking franchisees are going to be working in the business or on the business? Like, what's the model for franchisees with Dirty Dough?
The model is definitely on the business. So all of our projections, contrary to like a Crumbl where you as the owner are the operator, all of our modeling and our projections of labor include paying a full-time manager on top of obviously all your employees. So it's just overseeing a manager. And now our model is a little bit different, or it's very different. On the back end side, we looked at Crumbl and what they're doing well. Large cookies delivered fresh, warm. It wasn't actually Crumbl. It was another company out of Utah, Chip, that Crumbl had mimicked. That they copied them, and anyway, so maybe we're copying Chip. But high sales for this cool gourmet product. And then you look at other cookie companies. Well, there's Insomnia Cookies and Mrs. Fields. They've been around for 20 years. They've been around for 40 years, depending on which company it is. So Mrs. Fields has been around for 40 years. That means they have a good model, right? They have franchisees that have signed 10-year terms, and then another 10-year, and then another 10-year, and another 10-year. They've weathered the recessions. So what are they doing? Well, they're doing centralized production. They're not doing what Crumbl and Chip are doing. They are doing everything's produced out of Irvine, California, last time I checked, and then shipped out. So they're still baked fresh every hour inside the store, right? But they're not the raw ingredients aren't ordered there. So I thought, let's copy that model. Because that is a model that has weathered the recessions, because you can have half the square footage, right? You don't have to deal with inventory management. You don't have to deal with raw ingredients and the waste. You don't have to deal with hiring employees and training them how to mix and the waste that comes involved in that. It's just, you get a cookie, you put it in the oven, and weighing the cookies, man, that was the worst job. If you want a bad job, you should have worked for Dirty Dough a year ago, and we would have hired you, and the position would have been called baller. And you just sit over the counter and you ball the cookies, and you grab the dough, you put it on the scale, little pieces of dough on a time till it weighs just right. Then you grab it out and shape it. And you're just bent over just ever so slightly for your back to kill you after 4 hours.
So, man, I can
try to eliminate all of that.
I can just see, writing good job descriptions. Do you want to be a baller? And, people show up and they're like, this is horrible. So you kind of taken the best of both worlds, the best of what you've seen with Crumbl, the best of what you've seen in brands that have weathered recessions and downturns and real estate bubbles and real estate disasters and everything, inflation, you name it, they've been around. And you kind of looked at both of these brands, because Crumbl's crushing it. You know, I know some of the Crumbl franchisees, and they're very happy, and they are expanding themselves. So love what Crumbl's doing, but you're trying to do something different that is taking the best of their world, the best of this other brand that's been around for many, many years, and marrying the two. And there you have Dirty Dough.
Mm-hmm. So now we have a facility that we can make 700 cookies at a time rather than 70. We get large discounts because we've centralized our purchasing. We don't have to go through these third-party redistributors with their markup. And then we throw it through a machine that portions them rather than hand weighing everything. And then it portions them exactly every single time. So our quality control and our consistency are through the roof. And then this machine's really cool. It gives us a 3-layer cookie. So you can look at a cookie. It looks like a peanut butter cookie on the outside. You break it open, there's a chocolate dough. And in the very center, there's Reese's peanut butter flowing out. So it's really cool. You can get this cool gourmet cookie without having to, spend a ton of time dressing the cookie and, putting a 1/2 inch of frosting on the top of it.
So what, and this is all about saving labor. It's about consistency and the goal. I mean, we're in this market right now where labor is ridiculous. I was in Austin with some friends and that live out of state. And one of my friends who lives in the Seattle market, he said, Eric, Wendy's across the street from, he has an Orange Theory Fitness. He's like, Wendy's across the streets saying they're hiring starting at, I think it was $18 or $19 an hour. And so he's like, this is horrible. Wendy's, I have to compete with Wendy's. So I can see why you're doing this. Do you think you would have done the same thing before we experienced the pandemic? Like, is the model changed now that you were able to kind of, you weren't stuck to anything through the pandemic. You were able to adjust things. You've seen what's happening with inflation and employees and all of that. Like, do you think you would have had a different model pre-COVID versus where we are today?
Maybe. If I thought about it hard, I would have landed on the same model. But if I would have thought of like wow, the economy is great, labor is easy to find, it's cheap, then it would have been more tempting to just be like, let's just order the cookies, the raw ingredients, and do exactly what these other cookie companies are doing. But instead it was like, okay, what are my issues with this company? Well, it's the labor and it's waste. How do we reduce both of those? And the centralizing model got rid of pretty much all of that. So yeah, I think this is the model, but maybe I would have been tempted to be kind of more lazy and not go through this whole process because it's been in the pain in the butt, right? You have to find a warehouse space, you have to buy all the equipment, you have to produce it, you have to hire everybody. Much more work than just hiring, opening up the next cookie store. It's now we're in the food producing business as well, but I definitely think it was the route to go.
One of the questions I heard, I love studying, like asking really good questions to other people and yourself. One of the questions that I heard the other day about asking questions to yourself, if you're starting a business or scaling a business, like how do I break this business? What could I do to make this business a failure? Or what could happen from outside influences to make this business a failure? It could be COVID, I mean, that's one thing that could happen to some businesses, but then the ramifications of that, and it's like labor goes through the roof. I can't find good management. And those are things that are happening right now. So I love the model that you have where you're just, lowering all of those things, taking it off, and really just simplifying an already pretty simple model. Thoughts around simplification?
I think that this is the most simple food franchise that exists right now. And it was definitely designed to be that way. And talking about labor, a big part of labor is not just hiring, but hiring, training, and retaining, right? So now we've reduced the amount of people that we have to hire per dollar of revenue. We think we're hiring half of the people that you would typically do in one of these other models. Now, that baller position that I'm telling you about, nobody wants to do that. That's where all the turnover happens. You come in for 4 hours and you just like making balls of cookie dough with your hand and your back's killing you. That's where the turnover happened. We got this machine, we started producing this, and 8 months later, we'd lost like 1 employee, where before we were going through 1 every other month, right? So that's less training. And now there's just way less to train on. Here's a cookie, here's your oven. When the timer goes out, take out the cookie, right? Once you messed up. But it's not like, here's how your ingredients, this is how you have to mix it, this is how you have to measure it, you level it, right? this is how long you have to mix it for, in what order, and then does it go in the fridge before you ball it, or there's so many other things that you have to train on, and so many possibilities for error that we've just completely eliminated to reduce that turnover, the hiring process, all that, but really just trying to keep it simple as possible. Me not being ever in food and franchising, like if I can do it and manage it remotely, I think pretty much anybody could do it.
I want to talk about like your mindset around hiring for things that you don't have experience in. But before I do that, I just wanted to, make sure the audience knows that Dirty Dough Cookies is one of my portfolio brands. I have 4 different brands in my portfolio, and that means I have either equity, advisory shares, profit sharing, or something like that with these portfolio companies. So Dirty Dough is one of my portfolio companies, and I love working with the team over there, and I love talking about it. Just when I'm out, like I was in DC and Austin the last week and talking about Dirty Dough. I had Ty Lopez. I had dinner with Ty Lopez, and if you don't know who Ty Lopez is, he's a huge online influencer turned, a guy that makes a bunch of, or buys a bunch of massive brands like Pier 1 and Dress Barn and Stein Mart. Had dinner with him, sitting across from me, and we started talking about Dirty Dough because he's like, he knows I'm in franchising, and so we started talking about Dirty Dough. So Ty Lopez knows about Dirty Dough because it's a fun thing to talk about. And so out of that conversation, I had other people are like, Eric, tell me more about Dirty Dough. And and then all of a sudden you're getting your team, not you. I don't send you these people. I send them over to Wade. I'm like, Wade, I do a text intro. Hey, so-and-so's interested in looking at Dirty Dough. It's so fun to talk about. It's such a fun brand to be a part of. But more than that, people are excited to get into something like a cookie brand like this because they've tried to get into Crumbl and they can't. And one of the reasons is it's such an amazing brand. They've done so many things right. There's just nothing left for people. So people in my world that know franchising, that know about the space, they're so happy that you got that I got involved with this. And I talked to another guy in Austin that's looking at one of your competitors. He's like, Eric, I'm so glad I got to meet you in Austin because I saw that you're with Dirty Dough and I want to talk to them because we're about ready to buy a bunch of these from another emerging brand. I'm like, man, you really need to give Dirty Dough a look. And I started talking about, our first conversation. And before I got involved with a brand like this, I want to make sure the founder is not, thinking he's got the next thing. What is it? The next best thing, sliced bread. What's the sliced bread? What is that? The next best.
I don't know if it's the next best. I think it's just the best thing since sliced bread.
The best thing since. All right. So anyway, I screwed that up. So when we first met, one of the things that I was talking to you about is like, I wanted to understand like your goal with the company, what you're doing, because you didn't have any experience in food. You had, a lot of business experience. And then you started telling me about the team that you had. And I was just like, wow, like Bennett's doing things the right way. I want to be involved with this. So give me some of your philosophy around hiring, building a team, who you got on your team, because I think it's just amazing.
Yeah. So you mentioned the E-Myth model, and that's what I live with, So the solar company we built, me and my brother built the solar company. Within a year, we were out of the business and we sold it 6 months after that. So 18 months later. And that was because day one of the business, where do we want to take this business? Okay, let's create the org chart. What does that look? How many people do we have? And then you start working on each position. This is the roles of this position. Then you go hire that out with the goal of let me work my way out of the business so I could work on it rather than inside of it. So now on this one, I maybe took some shortcuts because I didn't perfect all the roles before hiring it because I didn't know how to do that. So instead I just went and hired, professional people that have been there, done that. Because it's like, well, can I open up, 1,000 Dirty Dough stores? Probably not. Can I, if I find somebody that's already opened up, several hundred stores? Probably, right? There's not. Anyway, so the first person that we hired, the first big hire was our CEO, Jill Summer Hayes. I actually contacted her to be an advisor, and she's like, you need me full time. She invented the mobile franchise concept. This was back in the 80s. She founded the company Maui Wowie Smoothies and Coffee, grew it to just under 700 locations, and then sold it. after running it for 35 years. So it's like, wow, been there, done that. Well, then she started a franchise development company, and her first client hired her as CEO. So she took that company from nothing to 90 locations in a few years. So I'm like, not only she's done it once, she's done it twice. So let's get her on board to mitigate the errors that I'm bound to make. Her experience. So let's lean on that. And then, well, the warehouse, and I talked about, now we're in the food business and we're in the food production business. Well, I've never done that. There's a company called American Crafts, and they do paper crafts. So one of my close friends 2.5 years ago, they contacted him. He's got a food science background. They said, hey, we want to get into food crafts. Can you develop this program? And he did. So fast forward 2.5 years, he's built 2 warehouses for him, 130,000 square feet each, hired everybody, sourced all the equipment. They did 70 million last year in just the food side, from 0 to 70 million in 2.5 years. So I'm like, okay, well, if he could do it for them, he could probably do it for us. And then same thing with the guy that we hired for all of our logistics. He had a trucking company that did 50 million last year. So let's get him on to do all of our logistics, because we want to move fast. So how do you move fast without, let's avoid as many mistakes as we can by leaning on the experience of people who have been there, done that.
So tell me more about the thought behind the board of advisors, because that's one of the things that I do. Why did obviously you reached out to Jill for board of advisors, like, sorry, you need me. And it's like, kudos to you for just listening to that. I mean, but like, why board of advisors?
I didn't, anyway, so I sold the solar company, and I'm like, cool, I just started my first company and I sold it relatively quick, kind of on top of the world. Then my buddy's like, hey, there's this startup course in Utah, and I was in San Diego, like, fly here, come to this 3-day event. And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Like, I probably know, I know what a startup is. I didn't know anything. So I took this course, and the guy who taught it was John Richards. He was the first person to take Yellow Pages online. They IPO'd that company. They took it public in 2000, I believe, as InfoSpace. And since then, he's been an investor in 100 plus companies, and like almost half of those have had successful exits. So I learned it from his course. Like, you need an advisory board. And I'm like, well, who better to have on your advisory board than the person teaching me about advisory boards? So I talked to John, kind of, hey, here's our model. And he said, well, I sit on the advisory board of 2 or 3 companies at a time. And yeah, I would be your guys' senior advisor. So I'm like, sweet. Who else do we get? Right. And that's, I'm calling Jill. And then we got Steve Hart. He owns Property Management Inc. It's the largest property management franchise in the nation. They have 400 franchises. So started just trying to build up that advisory role. And again, if I don't know how to do it, I can take the time and money to learn it, or I can take a little shortcut here and there by hiring or giving equity to an Eric who knows what he's doing, and who's leaps and bounds ahead of me. I do all the grunt work, per se, me and Wade, and then we just follow the people who know, we take the advice from the people who know what they're doing.
I love that. And if you're starting out from scratch, you don't have, here's the thing. I hear brands, they reach out to me, Eric, I want you as an advisor, but they are afraid to give up very much of their company. And I don't need a lot of a company to help, but they don't understand the value what an advisor brings. And until you if you don't understand what the advisor can really bring, which is speed, help you move fast, avoid a bunch of costly mistakes, and set you up to to be a brand that's a force to be reckoned with. But if you don't understand that value, what advice would you give to somebody? Like, what was your other option if you weren't to hire advisors, if you weren't to hire Jill? Like, where would you be right now, and what would your trajectory be?
I would have 100% of a small pie. That's what I would have, right? So it's you're giving up equity, or even if it's an investor, whether it's 10%, 5%, 1%, 20%, doesn't matter. The question is, will this allow me, if this is talking 10%, is this investment or this person or whatever, is this going to allow me to grow faster than, and have my company be bigger than 10% of what it could be? So if the answer is yes, then it's like, yeah, I'd much rather have a smaller piece of a larger pie, right? My goal is much larger than just open franchises, and maybe we'll get to that. but it's all centered on making an impact, being purpose driven towards mental health awareness, specifically in kids. So how am I going to do that? Does it matter if I have 100% of the company, or can I have 90% of the company, right? And bring on the right people so I can actually fulfill my purpose.
Let's segue into that. Like, what's your purpose? What's your why? What's the giving back component?
So Dirty Dough, we have one store open is all we have, the one that I bought. We've sold 60.
Let's stop there. So people might be thinking like, you have 100 open. No, there's not 100 open. We're building like that. We've got some amazing things we'll talk about with buyers, but I remember this, you and I were talking, I'm like, hey, I'm doing advisory stuff, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, how many companies do you have in a formal advisory relationship with? And I said, 0. And you're like, awesome. I didn't want you to have like 100. And so I just love the honesty. Like, I was honest with you right then, and I figured that was going to be a negative thing, but I'm like, I'm always upfront. And you right there, we have one store. So I just love doing business with people that are not afraid to own where they are. Now I have 4 companies. I won't have hundreds, man. Don't worry.
The sales background, you have sleazy salespeople, and my nightmare is to oversell and underdeliver. So, that's like, because that probably is, I want to be liked, so people are going to hate me. And that's probably, it's some insecurities that are driving me to do that. But hey, I do not want to be that guy that's like, you told me this and you underdeliver. That's not me. I'm going to be the opposite. I'm going to say, I'm going to deliver this. Would you be happy? And then when I deliver higher, then that's a win-win. So
I like that. So go back into where you were at one store, but I wanted to just hit that real quick because it gives you a lot of people know me and they know that's how I am, but there's a reason why, we're together in this, and that's part of the reason. I think that was kind of a fun story, but it tells the audience who you are and who I am. But okay, here you are, one store.
We sold 60 in our first. It's been, I guess, 5 months since we've been franchising. 60. We have 5 of them opening next month. And then we have 4 or 5 scheduled really every month after that. So we've been able to sell it based on the team and the model. Not so much that we only have one store, but it's going and it's a cookie craze. We're riding Crumble's coattail and these other cookie companies, right? I wanted a Crumble. Wade wanted a Crumble, my partner, and he couldn't get one because they're sold out, So anyways, a lot of people who are selling. So we saw the timing, we wanted to run with it. Now, if we could sell 60 franchises in 5 months, is it completely out of the possibilities that we have 1,000 of these someday? I don't think so. I think we can. So if we have 1,000 stores, what's the motivation to get to 1,000 stores? I mean, yeah, that company's worth a lot of money, but after even 60 stores, it's like, is it really going to change your day-to-day life? Like 60 stores is worth a lot of money. What's the bigger purpose? So I have 1,000 stores. Let's say I have 3 customers that I could potentially help. I have my franchisees, employees, both mine and their employees, and then the general public. So how can I serve those 3 customers with this vehicle that I've been given? Well, let's start with the franchisees. We talked about it a little bit, but I wanted a model that lasts a long time and that can weather the recessions. Why? Because I want somebody to have a passive income source that they can pass down to their kids, that it's not something like a job that you have to be in every day and your kid doesn't want to do that job. Well, it's more like I'm trying to build this like a real estate rental property. Like, yeah, there's some work involved, but you could just keep that sucker for 30 years, right? And it's going to pay off and it's going to provide generational wealth. So that's how I want to serve my franchisees. At the same time, lowering the barrier to entry to franchising by both bringing down the cost significantly, and we're half the cost of a Crumble to open up, less than half the cost. And then also the know-how and the knowledge and the skill. So giving more people the opportunity to buy a franchise that maybe typically wouldn't. Now, number 2 is our employees. So I've been very big into mental health. I grew up, I didn't know what anxiety was. I didn't know what depression was. I just thought everybody who had a headache was weak. Like, that's in your mind. I never had headaches. I never had migraines. I never had anxiety, depression, none of that. And I just grew up with a very negative aspect about that because I'm just like, I've never experienced it, so I don't know how to relate. Anyways, I listened to a podcast, Jonathan Haidt, a psychologist, and he's tracking the self-harm and suicide rate in kids, specifically girls. I listen to this podcast. I have a 2-year-old and a newborn. It scared the hell out of me. Okay, thanks for telling me like this huge problem. And now my daughter has a 30% chance of harming herself, right? But what do I do to prevent that? Well, a lot of it was, this Instagram life of you have a normal, messy, dirty, imperfect life, and you're comparing it to what appears to be a perfect life. So how do we combat that? And that's really, Dirty Dough as a brand, that's what we're pushing. It's what's on the inside that matters most. That's why we're doing these 3-layer cookies, and really pushing out that message. Now, for our employees, this number 2 customer that we have, they're 16 to 22-year-old females that typically works in a cookie store. Well, guess who's most affected by the mental health crisis? It's them. So as a corporate side, we pay for a life coach for every employee of ourselves and all of the employees of our franchisees. So you have an employee that's 19 years old and maybe she's a single mother, or maybe she has problems at home. Well, they pair you with a life coach. You get unlimited calls per month with somebody that's been through that. And it could also just be healthy eating, staying active, happiness mindset, getting into meditation. Any of these, there's like 50 options. There's not a person in the world that can read down this list and say, I don't need help with at least 5 of these. Even like financial stress, being a minority, like really anything. So we are paying for that for everybody to serve. Again, we have 1,000 employees. We have 1,000 stores. We have 20,000 employees. Let's make a difference. And then the third tier is our customers. And that's where the messaging comes out. What's on the inside matters most. Life is messy and imperfect, and it's meant to be enjoyed. These cookies are messy and they're imperfect, and they're meant to be enjoyed. So it doesn't have to be a perfect, clean, pristine looking cookie, which is kind of exactly what Crumbl embodies, right? It's like the perfect, like it has to look perfect. I'm like, that's cool. Bravo to them. Their cookies look great. But that's what I'm fighting against, is like, life's not like that. Life's not perfect. So how can we spread that message? So really spreading that message to the general public. And then we're building wellness rooms. We're partnering with the local franchisees. We're calling schools. This is a nonprofit that we're starting up right now. And Eric, you live in Spearfish, right?
Yep.
Okay. So Eric, you're a franchisee in Spearfish. I'm calling Spearfish High School and saying, hey, do you guys have this room? You guys have an extra room. We'll fund it. We'll give you all the supplies and the program to run a wellness room. And most of them know what this is. They're popping up everywhere. They say yes. Then we call Eric and we say, Eric, can you put in a few $1,000s? We'll put in a few $1,000s, and then we're going to raise a few $1,000s in the community to bring further awareness. And now what these wellness rooms are, it's a spot not for students. I don't like the word safe space because I think that's actually harmful to kids. It's more, life's gonna get messy and life, shit's gonna happen. Let's teach you how to cope with it. So they come to these rooms, they're only allowed to be in there like 10, 20 minutes. They're talking with a coach or grabbing an iPad and then going through guided meditation, happiness mindset, or breathing exercise, mindfulness, something like that. But it's about teaching them how to cope and really, be happy with who you are and not just chase the next shiny object and think, I'm going to be happy when I get XYZ, because man, the mental health crisis it's crazy. So that's what I like. That's kind of my big vision, is I'm serving those 3 customers. That's how I'm serving. That's what's motivating me to get to that 1,000 store mark, because I think I could impact hundreds of thousands of people if I do so.
It's been fun to talk through this with you, as this was, in your head and coming out and starting to go into in motion, and just to see where it's going. And again, in Austin at this fancy dinner with really important, really wealthy people, one of the spouses is a mental health counselor to children. And I know people that are in that world, and I know COVID has just, wreaked havoc with these kids. And she was like, you have no idea. And she was just talking to me about the magnitude of the crisis that's going on. I also know a franchise that's in this space, and they're doing very well. And one of the things that I just think about, which is why this brand was created, was just to make mental health and getting help and with stress and anxiety and all this stuff normal. Like it's normal to get help. And so I really, really love what you're doing with this. And I love brands that are tied back to a cause, not for the purpose of having a cause tied to a business, but like being really passionate about that. And I was just in DC, we raised over $50,000 to fight sex trafficking for a charity that does that. And there's an auctioneer, I should probably make an introduction to you. That's an amazing auctioneer, but he does charities for free. So he was there to raise that $50,000 as a guest there, and he does them on Zoom and different things. So we'll have to connect about that at some point. So love what you're doing there. Let's talk about your franchisees. So you have to get to that point where you have that many stores where you're able to have a much larger impact, you need franchisees. So who are the franchisees today?
We've accepted some people that are buying 1 or 2 stores, but a lot of them have bought, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 12, because the model allows for that. And then the unit economics are also favorable. If you open up 5 stores in one area, and each of these stores only have 10 employees, like you don't even need a manager per se. You need a shift lead, and then you need a regional manager. It's going to drop your labor cost. Now, what if somebody doesn't show up from one of your stores? Well, you call your other store, you have a group chat, right? And you're pulling from all your employees, and it's like, hey, get to this store, pay an extra X, Y, Z, So it's just more beneficial for us. It's more beneficial for them. That's the model. Plus it's like, oh, you were thinking about buying a Crumbl, because that's who's reaching out to us. What were you looking at spending on that? 400? Okay, let's get you at 2 Dirty Does, right? Like if you're going to spend the money anyway, let's get you 2 instead of 1. So that's kind of what we're shooting for right now.
So
finding those people that'll buy multiple of them that have the business experience, not so much the franchise and food experience, but they know how to run a business.
So you have some people that have significant net worths. They want to grow significant businesses with Crumbl, and you're kind of holding them back in some ways because you want them to, crawl before you walk before you run. But give us, you don't have to give names or markets or anything like that, but give me an example. You can I know there's more than one group that's looking at this, but why would somebody want to buy, 20, 30, 50, 100 of these things? Because I know there's groups out there that want this with with Dirty Dough right now because of what they've seen in Crumbl.
Yeah, we've talked with 3 groups that I've talked about doing 100 of them. One group talked about the crawl, walk, run. They purchased 10 so far, and they have funding for a lot more, but we want to make sure that they open these correctly. Now, do they know how to run and operate food franchises? Yes, they own over 105 guys. So they know what they're doing, but at the same time, we just want to make sure, we're not perfect either. So we need, a second to work out our kinks as well. But it's, spoke with a guy, ate at his pizza restaurant, and he owns tons of restaurants, tons of franchises. I don't know. I would guess 50. So I'm eating at his pizza restaurant, and man, it was good. We walk out, and he goes, you know what? That pizza, the crust was a little burnt. I'm like, I would have never known. Like, that was delicious. And he goes, this pizzeria kills it. And I only have one location. People say, why don't you open up, 50 locations? And because the pizza crust, he's like, it's not scalable. And he goes, that's what I love about your model. I haven't seen a more scalable, consistent model. So I think that's what these guys are saying. If you know business, if you're in business, you can kind of pick out, you're like, okay, low labor, low waste, low employees, like easy to run. Yeah, let's scale with that.
What, and like you said, these guys, I love your honesty with this. We're going to make mistakes too. And everyone listening, if an emerging brand like Dirty Dough that's poised to do very well, but they are an emerging brand, they are going to make mistakes. They need to know that. If they say they've got all the kinks worked out, like they're ready to run, that's a red flag. You need to watch that. So as you hear Bennett kind of just, as just being himself and openly sharing that, you want to be a part of brands that are the same way, because any emerging brand, even the best of the best that have a ton of franchising experience, a ton of industry experience, will make mistakes along the way, because I know it, I've seen it, and I just, I haven't seen any new brand roll out and scale rapidly without having mistakes made along the way. So let's talk about Crumbl. Some of the numbers. I've seen their numbers. I've seen friends of mine show me their numbers on their iPhones because they're like, hey, this is what we did, the net profit. And I'm blown away. I've known this about them. But just to be clear, you're not talking Dirty Dough. This is Crumbl, and this is public information that anybody can get if they pull their FDD.
Exactly. Yeah. And if they franchise in like Wisconsin or California, it's made public on their website. So their item 19, it shows that their average store did 1,678,000 and their net profit was 357,000. So I believe that was like a 21.5% margin. But man, who cares if these cookie companies cost $500,000? If you get 357 a year, like what? So their numbers are great. Now that was the average. And then you look at the next column, and I'm doing this off of memory. So the next column was their highest store, I believe. And it was like 3.5 million. Or 3.6 million, and their net profit was like 636,000. But the margin on that was 17.5%. And I'm like, that's really high sales to only have that. Well, why? And I mean, I think I know the answer. It's probably labor and waste, because there's a lot of both of those. And then the third column is your average or your median, which is same thing, is about a 17.5% margin. And then your last one was the lowest store. And their lowest store out of hundreds of stores, they still did $747,000. I think it was 743,000. It's like, what? Your lowest store did 743,000? What are you guys doing? Like, you guys are killing it. However, their net profit was only 33,000. It's a 4.5% margin. It's like, wow, that's crazy. We wanted a model like again, Mrs. Fields or Insomnia, they could do $500,000 and still pull a good margin, right? So that's like, if you do $500,000 at 20% margin, as long as these stores aren't super expensive, would you be happy? And if the answer is yes, then we know we have a good fit. Do we think we can get up to where Crumbl's? Certainly. Think we're headed to that trajectory. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. But the model, I mean, are cookies a fad? Everybody asks that. Well, cupcakes were a fad, right? Did we ever eat cupcakes before the cupcake fad? Well, not really, other than birthday parties. Same with frozen yogurt. Cookies, we've always eaten them. So I don't think cookies are a fad. Our $1.6 million cookie sell average a fad? I think so. I don't think that's going to last. So what's going to happen when the economy takes a turn or this fad kind of takes its toll and the stores start doing, $1 million, 700,000? It's like, well, are you going to be profitable at that point? Is it going to be a good business model? Now, if you're Crumbl, who cares? You've already tripled your money. You're right. It's such a good model. It doesn't matter. But that's what I'm trying to go for is it successful with low sales or with relatively low sales? And that's what we're building it off of.
I love it. I love it. So if you want some of the numbers that were given, they were given off of Crumbl. You can get the item, the FDD or item 19. Just Google state of Wisconsin FDD, and you can pull up a free FDD from there. So we were talking about Crumbl. You can also do the same thing for Mrs. Field cookies and whatever FDD that you want. So the numbers that Bennett was remembering off of memory were from that Crumbl FDD. Man, it's been fun having you on. We're going to have to do this again as we get these stores open. So thanks for coming on the show, and let people know how they can find Dirty Dough.
DirtyDoughCookies.com. You can also go to I have a personal website, BennettMaxwell.com, BENNETT. And there you can inquire about franchising, get some information about that. And then follow me. I try to post daily on, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So that's the best way to connect with me and Dirty Dough.
All right, man. We'll see you soon.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.